ready to use the microphone?
Yes, please.
Yeah? How's that? That much better?
That's great, thank you.
Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Before we begin, it's helpful for me to know who's here. So just by show of hands, how many of you are here as a parent? Okay. How many of you are here because you work as a counselor or a social worker? Now, many of you are putting up your hands more than once. I guess that's okay. How many of you are teachers? Okay. Did I miss anybody? How about school administrators? Okay. Did I miss anybody? Okay. My name is Tyler. I was born and raised in North Vancouver, Upper Lonsdale neighborhood. Went to Carisbrook Elementary School, and I went to Handsworth Secondary School. I have a wife and 2 kids. You may have seen them in my wallpaper on my computer while we were fiddling with this. My son is 4.5 and my daughter is 1.5. And so we're just on the verge of entering the school system, the public school system. So this is a topic that's kind of in our brains. I work 2 days a week at the ABLE Developmental Clinic. We have an office in West Van and another office in Surrey. And I also work independently in Kitsilano and in the process of beginning a practice on the North Shore independently as well. I work with a number of different types of people. A lot of children sort of 8 years old and up. I see a number of young people in high school in areas to do with conflict, bullying type things. I see a lot of young people with ADHD, as well as Asperger's syndrome, high functioning autism, and a lot of anxiety. I've been doing this for, well, I got my degree 7 years ago. I've been doing this kind of stuff in some capacity since I was 16. But over the last 7 years especially, I've seen a massive increase in the number of kids I see with anxiety. And so I think bullying is a factor in that, but I think there's a lot of other things. So everything that you will see on here, we can email you, so you don't need to write it down unless you want to. If you want to sign up, we can email it, or I think just by your registration, we can send you a PDF copy of all of this. So feel free just to listen, take whatever notes you want. I'll stop a few places along, and obviously at the end you can ask whatever questions you like. So let's begin. This is a topic that's quite uncomfortable. It's unpleasant. It doesn't feel good. But my hope in this presentation tonight is that you'll get a clear understanding of the dynamics at work in a bullying situation, and some theoretical directions to take, as well as some very practical things. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about I've stolen from Barbara Coloroso's book, The Bully, the Bullied, and the Bystander. How many people have read this book already? If you're going to read one book about bullying, I think this is the one. It's the most comprehensive, it's the easiest to read, it's the most down to earth, and has some very helpful, practical advice. So some of it is from there, some of it is from theories unrelated to bullying specifically, but I think very applicable. So in terms of what bullying is, it is the intentional use of force or coercion to abuse or intimidate others. It's relational, physical, and or verbal. Rarely is it actually only one. Usually bullying involves at least 2, sometimes all 3 sort of types of bullying. It involves an imbalance of social or physical power. It's intended to harm. there's always the threat of further aggression. It's not actually bullying if it just happened once and there's no way it will happen again, unless that person has left. There is always this sense that it will carry on. This time wasn't the last time or the only time. It involves an element of terror. So the bullied is afraid, and there is this chronic sense of fear. And it's based on things like race, religion, gender, sexuality, or ability. There is a difference between teasing and taunting, and often bullying is downplayed. We call it teasing. These are two very different things. Teasing requires that the roles can swap between the teaser and the teased, that there's no harm intended. It maintains the dignity of the one being teased. It's benign fun. They both laugh, it's innocent, and it stops when one person gets upset. If they say, hey, that's too far, then it stops. Taunting, on the other hand, is a verbal type of bullying that involves a static imbalance of power. So the one with power always has it. There is harm intended, it's humiliating or demeaning, it's harmful, it's laughter at, not laughter with. There's a sinister motive, and it persists even when the one being taunted is in distress. Teasing stops when somebody gets upset, taunting does not. And often we see that taunting is downplayed as teasing, even though the one getting taunted got upset and it carried on. Cyberbullying is a very hot topic for a whole number of reasons. Cyberbullying is any kind of bullying that happens online, in terms of email, over chatting, Facebook, YouTube, or in some cases we've seen young people create an entire website just for the purpose of bullying somebody. And within the framework of gaming. If young people are playing online games where they're chatting to each other through the game, it's another venue that we see for bullying. And over the use of cell phones with threatening bullying calls, voice messages, or texts. Cyberbullying is very difficult to supervise or create any kind of accountability. This is part of why this has become such a huge problem, is that we actually, it's very difficult to legislate, it's very difficult as parents to oversee. And if your child is being bullied online, it's very easy for the bully to be anonymous. And so it's very difficult to know what to do. Bullying material can be distributed worldwide. We've seen YouTube videos where one child bullies another become viral and be seen by millions of people all over the world. And it often takes a more vicious tone than face-to-face bullying. Because of the anonymity of the bully, the response in the victim is unseen, so there's no opportunity for empathy on the part of the bully. And projection is easier. We're going to talk about projection in a little bit. Another phenomenon we've seen in the last few decades is road rage. And that's because of the separation between the two individuals and the opportunity or the ease with which we can project onto the other person whatever we need them to be to contain or be worthy of our anger. And in cyberbullying we see a lot of the same things. Studies have shown that if we do counseling over instant messaging, people divulge more personal information faster than they do face-to-face, because there is that separation and that distance. And so we see a similar kind of thing with cyberbullying, where young people are more willing to be more aggressive over the internet. And the students bullied online are even less likely to tell an adult. Most of the time a child is bullied face-to-face in school, they don't tell anybody. statistics show that if the bullying occurs online, they're even less likely to tell anybody. I was meeting with a young man a couple hours ago, and I asked him about this. He said, well, you have your personal life, your school life, and your computer life. He said, and most parents don't know much about computers. And so we tend to keep it separate from them. So if we get bullied online, we don't tell them. And I find that scary a little bit. This is an unseen part of many young people's lives, and I think as parents and teachers and counselors, we need to make it more seen. How that's done is not easy to figure out. We tend to focus on bullying within schools, particularly high school. Now, a lot of what I'll talk about tonight is within schools, but I want to be clear that this is not a school problem, this is a societal problem. Bullying is a societal problem which is exaggerated in school. This is not something that ends at the end of grade 12. It occurs wherever commodity is limited and the commodity is elevated above human dignity. So if that commodity is oil or gold or money or prestige or power or control, bullying happens anywhere that the commodity is made more valuable than the dignity of the other person. Sexism, harassment, abuse, military occupation are wider outside of school forms of bullying. And 1 in 6 adults report being bullied at work. This is not just a school problem. Throughout history, we've seen sanctioned bullying, things like apartheid, segregation, and the Holocaust. In terms of the prevalence in school, in 2001, a US study showed that 75% of preteens said bullying was a regular occurrence in school. 86% of 12 to 15-year-olds get bullied at school. And over 50% of 8 to 11-year-olds said it's a big problem. Sorry, the font gets a little small here. A 1991 Canadian study that involved kids in grade 4 to 8, their parents and teachers, found that 35% of students were directly involved in bullying incidents, either being bullied or bullying themselves. It was worst for kids 11 to 12-year-old. 38% of special education students were bullied compared to only 18% of other students. If you have a child who's in special education, they're more likely to get bullied. We'll talk about why in a bit. And 23% of bullied students and 71% of teachers reported that teachers intervened most often or almost always. What does that tell you? Sorry?
Very different perception.
There's a very different perception. Bullying is happening more than we think it is. If you're a teacher, it's happening more than you think it is. Now, that's a broad statement. If you are in tune with your class, if you're in tune with your kids, you're more likely to know if it's happening. But most bullying doesn't happen in the classroom because you are there. It's more likely to happen in hallways, on the playground, or in the bathroom. So there's a great underestimation by parents and teachers in the frequency of bullying. 85% of girls and 76% of boys have experienced sexual harassment. And girls who mature early and boys who mature late are at a higher risk of being sexually harassed. In terms of gender differences, males tend to be more verbal or physical in how they bully. Girls tend to be more verbal or relational. Males target both genders, whereas females tend to just target other females. Males tend to bully to make their reputation, whereas females tend to bully to protect their reputation or their social circle of friends. Males tend to be aggressive, whereas females tend to be passive-aggressive in their bullying. Now, in terms of what makes a bully likes to dominate. They use other people, they lack empathy, they're narcissistic, choose their moments, they're relationally aggressive, they project their own faults onto others, they refuse to accept responsibility, they lack foresight, and they crave attention. Now, when I use the term bully, I'm not trying to label individuals. I'm trying to describe the role that the individual is playing. So we'll talk about bullies, bullied, and the bystander. These are roles. This isn't a label for a person. This isn't actually who they are. This is the role they're playing in that situation. And so this is the role that a bully plays. It's not actually who the person is. To summarize, the bully has a sense of entitlement. They have an intolerance of differences, and there's a liberty to exclude. Exclusion is a kind of bullying we don't often recognize. It's actually quite prevalent, especially if your child has a social disability. The bullying of exclusion is particularly weighty and hard to pinpoint. The bullied is the one who's the newest, the youngest, sensitive, submissive, annoying, shy, sexually different, financially different, racially different, religiously different, intellectually different, physically different, disabled mentally, physically, or socially, emotionally expressive, unconforming, or just in the wrong place at the wrong time. So we'll talk about how being different makes you more of a target for bullying. Now, some of you will have children who are different. Every child is different. Some are more different than others. About a third of my clients have high-functioning autism or Asperger's syndrome. They are different, and they are more prone to being bullied. And so how we teach a class or parent a child or administrate a school or run a program has to involve the embracing of differences if it's going to be safe for everybody. The bullied often is ashamed of being bullied, is afraid of retaliation if they tell. They believe no one can or will help. They believe bullying is just a part of life. 2 weeks ago I had a session with a young man with Asperger's syndrome. He was being bullied in his PE class, and he tried to talk to the teacher, and the teacher wasn't interested. And so I asked him what he thought about bullying, and he said, well, it happens, and you just have to endure it and hope it doesn't affect you too much, and know that it'll stop eventually. And it was hard to argue with his position because it worked for him, but it was sad that he didn't feel more empowered than that, that he didn't feel he had access to someone who would be on his side. And so he just endured it, and he endured it quite well, but it did drag him down, it ground him down, and now that PE is over, he's trying to recover. Now he accepts this as part of life. I hope that you don't. The bullied often believes ratting is bad. Ratting or tattling. We have to talk to young people and kids about what the difference is. Otherwise they will think it's just always bad to tell. Now, if your child is being bullied, they're going to show one or more of these signs, probably. There are also other reasons for all of these signs. So if you see one of these in your child, don't automatically assume they're being bullied. It could just be that they're a teenager, and they are emotional, they sometimes act out of character. If they rush home and have to use the bathroom really badly, it could just be because they drank 2 Slurpees on the way home. It might not be that they were avoiding the bathroom because that's where they were being bullied. Things like an abrupt change in their interests, in their grades, in their friendships, in how they interact with the family. Those kinds of things are things to pay attention to. If there's a sudden change in how they talk about their friends, if they come home obviously and their clothes are ripped and they have a black eye, then you might want to ask a few questions. And if they, especially in elementary school kids, if they're expressing somatic complaints like sore stomachs, headaches, things like that, these can be things associated with anxiety. Doesn't mean they're being bullied, but if they don't normally express those kinds of things and suddenly they begin to, it might be something to pay attention to. Now the bystander. This is a quote that I like that was in Black Beauty. It says, "My doctrine is this, that if we see cruelty or wrong that we have the power to stop and do nothing, we make ourselves sharers in the guilt." Now, the real key to changing a lot of bullying situations is in the bystander. We'll talk a bit about why this doesn't usually happen. In '95, a study in Toronto showed that peers were involved in 85% of bullying incidents. So these are people in your grade or close to your grade. Peers reinforce the bullying 81% of the time. So rarely is it just one student bullying another student. 4 out of 5 times there are other students reinforcing it. The peers were more respectful to the bully than to the target. And the peers were active participants in 48% of the episodes. So in 4 out of 5 cases, they just encourage it. Half the time, they participate. And the peers intervened in only 13% of the episodes at which they were present. This is an astonishingly low number, which says that our young people don't understand the opportunity when they see somebody being bullied. I was out for dinner with my parents the other night. I haven't seen it, but my dad was telling me about this commercial that's on TV where somebody starts bullying someone and the kids start making these siren noises. Has anybody seen this? Does anybody know? I looked for it on YouTube. I couldn't find it anywhere. Yeah. So there's one child bullying another one, and the bystander just starts making a siren noise, and all these other kids gather around and start making the siren noise as well. And a friend of mine is a principal at an elementary school. She said they showed this to their students, and it's caused a bit of a problem because at every recess now, some kids are making these siren noises, and they've kind of taken it too far. But the great thing about it is it gives kids a very practical thing to do if they see someone getting bullied. Just start making a noise, and it will attract attention. And that's the last thing that the bully wants, is attention outside of the circle of their supporters, because it creates this accountability. And so just creating something even silly to do actually can be quite a powerful tool. And what this 13% tells us is that our young people don't know what to do if they see bullying.
It may not be that it's created a problem too much. It may be just that they now have been given a way to open a dialogue.
Yeah.
Because there's so much bullying going on, they may not be exaggerating. Maybe now they can talk about it and say, okay, how do we define the difference between bullying and
Yeah. The statement was it may not have been creating a problem. It might actually be demonstrating how much bullying there is. That's possible. I think the school, I think, is quite a good one. I think the kids, anytime anybody looked sideways at somebody else, they would just start making the noise. But that's a better problem to have than this one. The 13% problem is a big problem. The most common reasons given for not intervening was that they were afraid to get hurt themselves. They were afraid of becoming a new target of the bully, and they were afraid to make the situation worse. There's a case in the States where a high school student made threats about bringing a gun to school to shoot the kid that was bullying him. And his friends he told his friends he was going to do it. The friends didn't want him to get expelled, so they didn't say anything, and the child went through with it and now has a life prison sentence. They didn't want to make the situation worse, and they didn't know what else to do, so they didn't do anything. Often they just don't know what to do. So I actually have to tell them what to do, give them suggestions and options, and what we find is they use them. Sometimes excessively, but better too much than not enough. So this brings me to some of the larger theoretical framework from which to view bullying. There's a reason why we bullying, and I think a primary reason is because we scapegoat. Now the original use of the term was in biblical times. At the celebration of Yom Kippur, the high priest would symbolically lay the sins of the community on the head of a goat, and they would send the goat out into the wilderness to die as a sacrifice for their sins. And we do this today. We just don't use goats. We use whoever is most different. And we project all of the problems in the group onto one person, and we systematically exclude them, or we bully them until they leave, and we think, and for a period of time afterwards, the problems are gone. The problem is, every year at Yom Kippur, they had to bring out a new goat, and after our scapegoat leaves, after a little while, we need another one, because the problems haven't gone away. We have to find somebody else to lay them upon. So, there is the saying that the secret to success is knowing who to blame, but in this case, it's not true. Scapegoating is when we project our sins, our shortcomings onto the one who commits the sin of being different. And we reject them and send them away. Or we just treat them so badly they leave themselves. And we project on them our insecurities. Now, projection is an idea that was developed by Sigmund Freud, and it's a defense mechanism where a person subconsciously denies his or her own negative attributes by ascribing them to the outside world instead. Thus, projection involves imagining or projecting faults onto others. Whatever there is about myself that I don't like, if I don't handle it or deal with it, I will project it onto somebody else and believe that that is true of them, so I don't have to deal with it within myself. And I think part of the reason why we see bullying more prevalent in the preteen age, 11 to 12 in high school, is because it's a time of great insecurity. And so it's very difficult for a young person who's feeling insecure to acknowledge their insecurity and manage it and deal with it well. So instead, if I'm insecure and I can't handle it, I will treat you in a way that makes you feel my insecurity, and you become the focus, and it makes me feel better. Now, this gets to some of the root of the problems that we need to teach young people what to do with their uncomfortable emotions. Most of the time they may not know they're even having it. And so emotional awareness has to be a part of any program that's going to address bullying at its core. Is what do you do with the parts of yourself you don't like? If you don't know what to do with them, you will treat somebody near you who commits the sin of being different in a way that makes them feel your insecurity instead. And then the cycle just continues and continues. Now, this is a clip I want to show you. This is two sketch artists named Key and Peel. This is a bit edgy, but it creates, it illustrates, I think, very sharply what I mean by projection. So excuse some of the language. It's not too severe, but here we go.
Why you reading, bitch? I didn't know that. Thanks so much for opening up to me. Shut up, queer. I understand. Why you gotta go there? I've been having sexual fantasies about some of the other guys. It's just going to find me at. I'm afraid of these demons and what they...
He's projecting, but he knows he's doing it, which just creates this tension. This is what projection is. He can't handle what's going on inside of him, and so he projects it on this kid who's just reading a book. And then his dad shows up, and you see that actually every bully is bullied as well. Now this gets to another part of understanding what's happening in the broader context of bullying. We have to understand that every bully is bullied. If we are going to address the core root of bullying, in the vast majority of cases, there has to be a way of relating to the bully that provides a new opportunity for them to interact in a new way. Which is why we don't want to label them bullies. They're choosing bullying behavior. They're relationally aggressive. But we label the role, not the person. Because if we label the person, we actually exacerbate the problem. Now, I heard on the CBC a few months ago, Christy Clark, I really appreciate how outspoken she is about the problem of bullying and has done a lot to really support programs to combat bullying. But in this interview, she was really pushing for laws that make bullying behavior illegal and prosecutable. And in this interview as well were two grade 12 students, two girls from Vancouver. And they very eloquently said, actually, we don't think that's the right way to go, to try to prosecute bullies. They said, because we have to understand why they're doing it, and we need to engage them in a way that gives them an opportunity to engage well. And I just thought this was so insightful, and this is why. If two people are in conflict, we'll call one person P, and the other person V, and you'll see why in a second. If these two people are in conflict, they're like a span between 2 points. And they can handle a certain amount of pressure. Now, once the pressure gets to be too much, one or the other will leave to go and triangulate the situation. So we would be hesitant to drive across the Lionsgate Bridge if it was just a straight span from the North Shore to Stanley Park. We might have to go one car at a time because we know this thing cannot handle a lot of pressure. But because they've built these triangles into the bridge with the cables, we know it can handle a lot more. And the same is true relationally. And so two people in conflict can handle actually a very small amount of tension. And when it gets to be too much for one or the other, the one leaves, and you end up with the drama triangle, we call it. Once this triangle is established, there's always the same three roles. There's always a persecutor, the bully. There's always a victim. And there's always a rescuer. Now, the way I'm going to talk about this at first doesn't completely apply to the situation of bullying, but bear with me for a minute. Now, the conflict originates between the persecutor and the victim. So person P and person V. Person V is the one who left because the tension got to be too much, and they involve a rescuer. And the rescuer and the victim get close. That's my attempt at a squiggly line. And that closeness creates a distance between the rescuer and the persecutor, and creates a distance between the victim and the persecutor. And so the triangle ends up looking like this, with the persecutor out on their own, and the rescuer and the victim close. Now, this isn't real intimacy because they're not actually in a stable relationship. They're just close because they're both distant from the persecutor. And the persecutor gets relationally cut off, and they experience anger. The rescuer operates out of anxiety, and the victim operates out of fear. Now, in this kind of a dynamic, the victim actually has a high degree of power and control, but they're afraid to use it because of the responsibility that comes with it. And what, in the situation of bullying, the triangle gets flipped around. So we have the persecutor, or the bully, and the rescuer, the bystander, close. And the victim, the one who's being bullied, is the one that's on their own and emotionally and relationally excluded. And so the persecutor feels powerful. The rescuer still is operating out of anxiety because they're afraid. And we have a victim who now is experiencing fear and anger. And if you have a young person who's afraid and angry, bad things happen if this is allowed to go on for a prolonged period of time. Depression is anger turned inward. And if you have a young person who's afraid and angry, there's nowhere for them to express their anger except internally. If they externalize the anger, they either go on to bully somebody else, or they go on to try to bully the bully. And in extreme cases, we see gun violence in school, or we see them retaliate in some other less lethal way, but equally destructive at times to reputations, to safety, and to futures. And so what we hope to do, instead of creating triangulation, is to invite all the parties into the circle. And the term in the book is a circle of caring. Now, the administrators that I have seen do this well are the ones that invite everybody involved into their office, and they sit down and they talk. And this changes everything, because as soon as a bully experiences and witnesses the emotional effect of their bullying on the victim, it's very difficult for them to carry on bullying. In some cases, it won't make a difference. Those cases are rare. If you're dealing with someone with narcissistic personality disorder or an antisocial personality disorder, it won't change anything. However, the accountability of the principal or the teacher, whoever's involved, will. And so the distribution of power has to be shifted. The bully is trying to take power from the victim, and somebody needs to intervene in order to redistribute power, not to take it from the bully, but to protect the power of the one being bullied, and to invite the bully to engage better. Now, if empathy is in the room, things just change on their own. It's not a lot of work, you just have to let them talk. A client I saw last week was getting bullied for a few months. Eventually he couldn't take it anymore, so he got in a fist fight with his bully, who unfortunately he found out had been a boxer, and so he got beat up. His bully followed him into the bathroom. His face was bleeding, and he thought he was following him there to finish him off. Instead, he followed him into the stall and got toilet paper to help him clean his face up, and he apologized. Because the situation had escalated to a point where the bully could no longer deny the pain he was causing the victim. And so he stopped. Now, my client went home, and obviously his mom saw his black eye and called the principal, and the principal brought them into his office and very calmly just had them talk. And the victim said, "Why have you been doing this to me for the past 3 months? Every time you see me, you shove me into a locker, and you're calling me all these terrible names." He said, "Because I heard that you mistreat women, and I hate people who mistreat women." He said, "I would never do that." And the bully said, "I didn't know that." And now they're friends. Now that is somewhat of a straightforward situation in some ways, but the effect was that the bully was invited to engage well. He was given an opportunity to understand and to express himself in a helpful way, and it caused a change. That's somewhat of a straightforward situation because it escalated quickly, and there was a brief fight, and then it was dealt with. Now, in no way do I promote physical retaliation or anything like that, but what the principal managed to do is create a circle of caring, and it changed their whole dynamic. Now, this is the last sort of theoretical framework for bullying that I want to give you, but this is something called the Thomas Kilmann modes of conflict. Before I go on, does anybody have questions about the drama triangle and how that dynamic works itself out? We'll have questions at the end as well, so if you come up with something, there'll be another chance. In terms of modes of conflict, when we're in conflict with somebody, we're conflicting over competing values. Now, one of these values is around the task. Getting something done, winning a competition, gaining power, something like that. And the other value is the relationship. And we tend to separate these modes into 5 different segments. None of these modes are inherently right or wrong. People run into problems when they get stuck between 1 or 2 of these modes and can't find their way out. Now, if you have a low value around the task and a low value around the relationship, you just avoid the conflict. Again, it's not inherently wrong to do, but if you get stuck there, you run into problems. If you value the relationship and you don't really value the task, you just accommodate the other person. You just say yes to whatever they want because you value the relationship far more than whatever the issue is. If you value the task far more than the relationship, you compete. So when we go to the Canucks, we want them to value the task of winning over their relationship with the opposing team. If they value the relationship, they would just hand them the puck. Sometimes I think that's actually what they're doing. That they're supposed to value the task, and so they compete. And in the playoffs, the value around the task goes even higher, and the value around the relationship decreases even more. And so they really beat the tar out of each other. If you have moderate values around both, you compromise. And if you have high values around the relationship and the task, you collaborate. Some of the best music that's ever made, it's a collaboration between 2 musicians with a great relationship and a high value around writing some really great music. Now, if we avoid, both parties lose. If we accommodate, we know that they are winning and we are losing. If we compete, we're trying to win and make them lose. A compromise is a bit of a win-win, and a collaborate is a massive win-win. Now, when it comes to bullying, our drama triangle lays over these values like this, with the bully stuck in this mode of competing for power, for prestige, for reputation, for friends, whatever it may be. They're stuck in this mode of competition, and they don't value the relationship. The bystander is accommodating the bully, and the bullied is just usually trying to avoid it. What we hope to do, if we can create a circle of caring, if we can actually invite all parties to engage well with each other and be removed from the roles of persecutor, rescuer, or victim, we're actually inviting them to collaborate with each other. Now, when stress is high, we see people move towards competition or accommodation, and if the stress persists, people move towards avoidance. Now you'll see this in companies that have a boss who is a bully, who is always competing to get their employees to do the job a certain way at a certain time. The boss is a competitor. He will hire accommodators, and over time you'll see the accommodators begin to avoid by showing up late for work, calling in sick, and eventually quitting. That's the ultimate occupational avoidance. And so if over time the bully isn't invited to value the relationship, they will remain stuck in this competition mode. And any program that's going to address bullying has to actually invite the bully out of being stuck as a competitor and invite them to compromise or collaborate. Now, too many of the media presentations about bullying, too many social responses to bullying actually just reinforce this. We become competitors with the competitor, and it just means we end up with more black eyes. And so we actually need another way. We have to actually invite people to collaborate or to compromise. So before I make some suggestions of what to do if your student or your child is being bullied, I want to tell you what not to do. Don't dismiss or downplay it. Now this sounds like a no-brainer. In 7 years, I haven't had one person who is being bullied or abused tell me that the person they told about it overreacted. It never happens. Actually, it rarely happens. How many people know about what happened at Penn State in the last year? Or what came out? Penn State has a massive football program. And in the last 12 months or so, it came out that one of their football coaches, who was running a program for high school football players to come to Penn State for training, this coach was sexually abusing boys. And one of the assistant coaches of the senior team saw it and told the head coach of the Penn State football team. That coach then told the head of the university, and this happened years ago, and nothing was done. And now these are reasonable men. These are not evil men. These are reasonable people with spouses and children. And so we have to ask ourselves, why? What happens when we hear about something like this that makes rational people underreact? And what we're finding is that when we hear a story of somebody being traumatized or abused, we experience it vicariously through them. And it's painful and repulsive, and we avoid it. And so they did for years. This coach was allowed to go on abusing boys. Everybody thought somebody else had or would deal with it, and nobody did. And so when it came out, there were a lot of problems. There is this natural tendency to not believe it's happening. If you're a parent and you had to go to the school and tell a teacher or a principal that your child is being bullied, you might receive opposition. You might not be believed right away. And it's for these kinds of reasons. I can't believe this child who appears so sweet could do something so mean. And so when we hear about it, we have to be aware there is this natural tendency in normal people to underreact and to not believe, and we actually have to work hard to not dismiss it or downplay it. Also, don't become reactive or emotional. If a child thinks you will overreact, they won't tell you. And if they know you will underreact, they won't bother telling you either. And so we actually have to follow their emotional lead. Don't rush in to solve the problem. You take power from an unempowered child if you rush and fix it for them. And so you're no further ahead. Do not suggest avoidance as a long-term solution. It suggests to the child to embrace their lack of power. And if they learn to avoid, they will avoid. And being stuck in that mode of conflict is unhelpful in the long term. Now, as a short-term solution until the problem can be dealt with on a deeper level, avoidance might be necessary. Don't suggest fighting back. Usually one or both people end up with a black eye and getting suspended. In my client's case, it kind of went okay, though it could have gone a lot worse. And don't confront the bully or their parents alone. Every bully is bullied, and if this child is bullying your child, chances are their parents are bullying them. And if you confront those parents on your own, it may not go well. Now, if you know the parents, if you have a relationship, you can use your judgment, but it's something that likely you will want a third impartial party involved with. So what do you do? Well, you engage, so you press into the situation. You get help if necessary from a counselor, a social worker, a teacher, or a principal. You educate yourself and your child. Tell them it's not your fault. This seems silly to have to say because of course it's not, but they may not know that. Especially if your child has a social disability, they will likely think they did something wrong and somehow deserve it. And so it's better to err on the side of just telling them it's not your fault. Empathize. This is what's missing from every bullying situation. And so as adults, we need to bring it. I hear you, I'm here for you, I believe you, you are not alone. Ask questions that you don't already know the answer to. These are empathic questions. Imagine your child is in the forest and they're lost and they've called you on their cell phone and they don't know where they are, but they're going to tell you what they can see in order for you to try to find them. And so the questions you would ask to find them physically, you ask to find them emotionally. How does it feel? What do you think about this? How does it make you think about yourself? When is it the worst? Do the feelings change? You ask these questions you don't know the answer to, and your child will feel like you're empathizing with them. And empower all parties to engage well. If a child has been bullied for a long time, likely they will feel like they have no control, no power. Options is to give them power. To give them suggestions will give them power. The bystanders will not know what to do, and if they don't know what to do, about 1 in 10 will do something. If we give them ideas of what to do, if we empower them, they will do it because they know it's not right. And if we empower a bully to engage well, with the right leadership and accountability, they will do it as well. In most cases. In some cases, it's a deeper, bigger psychological problem than that. But in the vast majority of cases, if we hold a bully accountable and invite them to engage well, they will do it. So give your kids these messages every day, and they will be less likely to be bullied, or they will know how to respond to it. I believe in you, I trust you, I know you can handle life situations, you are listened to, and you are cared for. You are very important to me. Now you give your kids these messages in many other ways than just verbally. But a child who believes this is less likely to be bullied because they walk around with their power in a more central place in their being. Some kids walk around with their heart on their sleeve, or they haven't found their voice. These are the kind of terms we use for kids whose power can be taken. And if a child receives these messages often, they carry themselves in a different way. It doesn't mean they won't ever get bullied, but it means if they do, they will inherently have a sense of how to respond to it, and that they don't deserve it. The impact of a bully, or the felt need to be a bully, can be buffered by the daily reinforcement of these messages in your child. Your child believes that they like themselves, they can think for themselves, and there is no problem that cannot be solved. They're less likely to become a bully. And if they are bullied, they will be more able to handle it and know how to respond to it. So the 4 antidotes to bullying is a strong sense of self, being a friend, having a friend, and being part of a group. If these 4 things are in place, a child is far less likely to be bullied, and they're far less likely to bully. The persecutor is the one who is afraid of being excluded, who cannot handle their own insecurity, so they don't have a strong sense of self. Their friendships are not real friendships. They have managed to drag the rescuer onto their side of the triangle because they're afraid. And so they don't have real friends, they have followers because they're afraid. And they're not part of a real group, they're part of a gang, not an official one. It's a very different dynamic in a gang than a group. It's motivated out of fear and anger. So this is, before I do this, does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any stories they want to share of being bullied, or their child who was bullied and how they dealt with it or responded to it?
I have a almost 15-year-old who is socially awkward and has been bullied since he was little. So he's in grade 9 now. In primary school, there was one prime bully in the school that bullied not just my son, but most of the kids at some point had an experience with him. But, we went through talking to the parents with the principal sitting the boys down, the teacher sitting the boys down, blah, blah, blah. Finally, in grade 6.
This is a way for an individual child to defend themselves against an individual bully. That is a good thing. But that in and of itself will not address our societal bullying problem, which is that as we grow increasingly multicultural, we have to work harder at engaging each other in a way that we can know each other and we can empathize with each other. If not, we will project onto each other whatever we don't want to deal with within ourselves. We're in big trouble then. If that becomes culturally acceptable, that's a very dangerous path to be on. A friend of mine works with a lot of youth and has for years, and he suggested that the way to address bullying is the way we've kind of addressed smoking. It used to be seen as cool, and it's not anymore. It's kind of seen as dumb. And he was saying that a lot of the approaches or programs about bullying is this kind of just say no or just don't do it approach. We know from the 80s and 90s that approach to kids and drugs just didn't work at all. So his suggestion is that we have to actually frame bullying as weakness. Create the association in children and young people's minds that when somebody's bullying, they are a weak person. And it will change the stigma around it. It's still perceived as strength, manly aggression, or female relational aggression. And we have to shift it to be seen as just weakness in order for it to become socially less acceptable. Now, we know it's not acceptable. It is antisocial behavior. We're the only mammals that live in community groups with people we're not genetically related to. And so it requires us to be social. And bullying is antisocial. It's not normal, though it happens to many of us. We have to push this perception that it's antisocial. It's not normal to do. Now, this is how many of you know TED Talks? Fantastic. Short. They're really well done. This was a TED Talk about, it's called The First Follower. Now, this is footage from the Sasquatch Music Festival in 2009, and as you can see, there's a guy dancing with his shirt off. Now, what you didn't see prior to this is that every once in a while, people would come up and kind of dance around him to mock him and then leave. And then this person started filming, and this guy in the green shirt shows up and starts dancing with him. Not actually to mock him, but because it looked like this guy was doing something fun or interesting. So he joins in. And there, you see him invite his friend. And he engages. Now, suddenly the guy without his shirt on went from being different, an outcast who was vulnerable and was being bullied. Now suddenly he's a leader because he has his first follower. And now we see his friend finally arrives. And now you have a group. And now there's something happening. A movement has begun. And it looks like fun. Suddenly this isn't one guy being weird and different. This is a group. And other people start to catch on and join in because there's something different here that was being mocked, but somebody saw the value in it and joined in, and it opened the door for others to join in as well. And within a minute here, we've got 20 people, and then you see others who weren't comfortable joining in until the group was bigger and provided more safety. And then the floodgates open, and it grows and grows. This is a movement now. And to not be in there suddenly feels a little bit vulnerable. You're missing out on something. You're actually becoming the outsider by not including yourself. It hasn't even been 2 minutes and there's 50 people. And it grows and it grows. All because some guy in a green shirt thought this guy without a shirt was onto something. And people come running without shirts or pants. Because it looks like there's something new happening here. So if we can encourage young people to have the guts to be the first follower when there's somebody being different, you can do something like this. If we frame or create an association with difference being bad or dangerous, we have a lot of problems. If we can frame different as good and interesting and something that has potential, something to be admired, like playing with Rubik's Cubes at school, you can create a movement. So many high schools have been completely transformed because somebody was into something, they owned it, and somebody started to follow them. There's a school in the greater New York City area, an inner city school that has these killer chess teams. and have had for years. And it is cool now to be on the chess team in this inner city New York school because somebody was doing it and somebody else came along and the teachers encouraged it and stuck with it until it became a movement, and it's completely changed the school. This other one I want to show you, I think, is a fantastic example of inspiring leadership in a group with a common purpose. If we don't give our kids and our young people leadership, they sort of devolve into Lord of the Flies, where Piggy's glasses get broken and eventually he gets killed, right? Because he was the most different and there was no leadership. Now this is an example, I think, of absolutely fantastic, inspiring leadership in a group with a common purpose.
And I know you guys get tired of it. It's little things. Coach Peter Morales of the Coronado High School Thunderbirds in El Paso, Texas, makes no qualms about it. He has a favorite on this team. Mitchell, I need you. Help me out with my coaching tips, Mitchell. Team manager Mitchell Marcus has a developmental disability. 1, 2, 3. He far surpasses everyone here when it comes to love of the game.
He's just an amazing person. That basketball team loves being around.
Hey! Mitchell's mom, Amy, says he's always been that way.
Mitchell always had a basketball that was always putting on her first birthday.
And because basketball is that important to him, on the last game of the regular season, the coach told Mitchell to suit up.
What was it like to put on the uniform? I was very happy. I bet you were.
Just wearing a jersey was enough for Mitchell. But what he didn't know, what no one knew at the time, was that the coach planned to play him at the end, no matter what the score.
You were prepared to lose that game. For his moment, yes. For his moment in time, yes.
And so, with a minute and a half left, Coronado leading, but only by 10, Coach Morales put in his manager.
And just started hearing Mitchell.
But here's where the fairy tale fell apart. Although his teammates did everything they could to get Mitchell a basket, each time they passed him the ball, he either missed the shot, or like on their last possession, booted it out of bounds, turning the ball over to the other team with just seconds left.
He wasn't able to score, but I was hoping that he was happy that he was just put in the game.
Could you have ever imagined what happened next?
No, I could not. Not at all.
What happened next happened on the inbound. The guy with the ball there is a senior at Franklin High School, number 22, Jonathan Montañez.
I was raised to treat others how you want to be treated. Just Mitchell deserved his chance, deserved his opportunity. I think I'll cry about it for the rest of my life.
What Jonathan did was yell out Mitchell's name, then threw the ball right to her. Right there. One of the most memorable turnovers of all time. It wasn't the game-winning shot. When the buzzer sounded, Coronado had 15 more points than Franklin. But Jonathan's assist and Mitchell's basket did change the outcome decidedly. Play any game with this much sportsmanship, both teams win. Stu Hudman on the road in El Paso, Texas.
What do you think? Isn't that a fantastic story? Now that kid would have been bullied in many schools because he was clearly different. But this coach led his team and the entire school in how to respond to Mitchell and how to embrace his differentness. And they followed. I mean, fantastically so. The other team even followed, right? They stopped competing and accommodated him. They collaborated all together to get Mitchell his basket, and the whole school gets to celebrate with him. But this kind of leadership, unfortunately, is rare, where a coach is willing to put the effort in to make space for a kid like Mitchell. But you see what happens if we do it. I think our young people are desperate to follow something that looks inspiring. And I think if we inspire them, they will live with this kind of passion and grace and compassion. And you see an entire school, both sides, just go for it. So. Are there any questions or anything anybody wants to say before you think is conducive to it? Then go ahead. Especially with younger kids, I think it's more likely to be okay. With high school students, it's a bit riskier. I think it's just a judgment call. I think it's something to be cautious about because in some cases it just goes really badly. And now the triangle has been exaggerated and established, and you may end up getting shoved into the persecutor role. And the other parents will rescue their child if they believe you are victimizing them by calling them a bully. So having a third party there means a third party who is not triangulating, but who's trying to invite everybody together to talk. It prevents the triangulation. So I'm not saying don't do it. I think it's something just to be cautious about. But generally, with elementary school kids that are being bullied, I think if it's possible to have the bully over to your house for a play date, often that couple of hours changes everything. Because they see where your child lives, they experience your family, and the projection stops.
I've had a situation with my friend, his son at age 5 was being bullied.